This week on the Inktwell, we take a look at the Wing Sung 618. Hello everyone, this week we're taking a look at the Wing Sung 618. Let me go ahead and get everything cleaned off here. So let's go ahead and start off with the cap band itself. On the band, you've got Wing Sung 618, made in China, stamped into this pretty unassuming but stylish chrome cap band. And I do feel that the cap band, along with the clip itself, help accentuate the overall style of this demonstrator. It's simple yet elegant, even though the clip does completely rip off Parker 51. But that said, you still do get a very good amount of ink for this pen, and looking at the nib, it's actually a really interesting nib design. Now, the style does rip off Parker again, but when you remove the grip section, you can see that it's just standard steel extra fine nib, but the way they've done the feed underneath the section, along with the friction fit O-ring that you see there, does keep this nib nice and wet. Now, the key selling feature for me, at least on this pen, is the piston itself. It's a simple, cheap Chinese piston pen, but the piston mechanism itself is actually pretty sturdy and doesn't have as much play as I've seen from other major brands. Look at this piston lock. Now, other brands, when you try to post on a piston, you run the chance of unscrewing and ejecting all the ink in the piston itself. With this though, once you've filled your pen, you just push the end cap in and you've locked the piston in place. This would actually help a lot of major brands as well. So for the writing sample, we're going to use Pelikan Edelstein Topaz, mainly due to its medium fast drying nature without sacrificing any quality of the color of the ink. So let's go ahead and dig into the writing sample. So here we go with the Wing Sung 618 Extra Fine using the Pelikan Edelstein Topaz on Rhodia No. 16 dot pad paper. You can already tell this pen has pretty good flow to it for an extra fine. It actually almost feels like it's writing like fine more than an extra fine as I continue to use it. Now, one thing you also may notice, I'm actually having to grip the pen a little harder than normal, because the way the section is tapered, it really doesn't give itself a good grip. And that's even with me wearing really grippy rubber gloves. Now let's go ahead and flip it upside down and take a look. Now this is more of what I would consider to be extra fine. If the pen wrote like this normally, that would still be really good. But as is, when I write with it normal, I still have a pretty good quote unquote extra fine nib, even though I'm really going to call it a fine any day of the week. Now, let's go ahead and run the X's and the figure eights really quick so you could go ahead and see, well, really just how consistent this nib is. There's not going to be any line width variation. There's not going to be any feed variation. It's just consistent. And as you can see, it's actually a really wet nib. So moving on to the pros and cons of the Wing Sung 618, the first pro is the piston itself. Like I said earlier, I'd like to see more manufacturers using this locking piston system. Up next is definitely price, with it being under $20 on Amazon Prime, for the fine nib variant at least. It's a really good pen at a really good price with Prime shipping. Now, the next pro is the smooth feel of the nib itself. That said, you do tend to find a little bit more quality control issues when it comes to these cheaper pens. I just ended up with a good nib on this one, and I'm happy for it. Now, the final pro with this pen has to be the demonstrator body itself. Now, time will tell if this one decides to start showing cracking or anything like that, but for right now, it's a good, clear body with really good machining of the pen. Now, I briefly touched on what I would consider to be the only real con of this pen. With the nib, you're going to be running the risk of potential quality control issues, as with any case in mass-produced, cheap goods. That's not necessarily a bad thing, it just means you're going to have to be a little bit more vigilant and maybe have to contact the seller if you purchase on Amazon. Now, there's one last pro that I keep coming back to, and that's why this pen would always be considered a good purchase for me. That locking piston is key. I can post this pen and not have to worry about it. I can toss it around and I'm not going to have ink shooting all over the place. So where does that put this pen for me overall? Honestly, with the pros that the pen has at the price point it does, I have to give this pen an 8.5 out of 5. Honestly, it's a good buy for under $20. So there you have a quick look at the Wing Sung 618. I'd really like to thank Urban Hafner from FPC.Ink for sending me this pen from his personal collection so I could review it. Actually, I think he just gave it to me to give it to me, which is awesome because he collects a lot of cheap Chinese fountain pens and has a huge wealth of knowledge when it comes to that. You can find him, once again, over at fpc.ink. That's also where you can track all the fountain pen inks that you use. Now, you can also find him on his podcast, The Fountain Pen Companion, as well as every other week on Two Guys Zero Planners, where he shares hosting duty with me on that podcast. You can pick those up on your podcast player's of choice. And if you want to pick up the Wing Sung 618, I'd honestly recommend heading over to Amazon. That way, you've got really good buyer protection, and you've got an easier way to reach out to the seller if you need to, and that's really a big if in quotation marks. If you want to pick up the paper or the ink used in these reviews, head on over to penchalet.com, click on the radio podcast link at the top of the page, and enter Inktwell in the How You Heard About Us section for your 10% off site-wide on everything. So that wraps up this week's video. If you liked it, click like. If you didn't like it, you know what to do. But either way, hit subscribe. And don't forget to support the channel at patreon.com/theinktwell. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at theinktwell. And definitely thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next week.